used as tools of vengeance against those who try to cheat their destinies. We all know them and even fear them. Let's talk about the Furies. Hello all you funky people, Funky Monkey here. Welcome to today's episode. How are you? How's life treating you? All good? Awesome, then let's start. If you are a world builder, I have a question for you. Does the pantheon of your world include vengeful deities, and do they command spirits of vengeance that they set forth? Do you have Furies or Erinyes in your world? And I don't just mean the creatures that your players can encounter and defeat, but the whole idea, the concept behind them. Either way, I am sure that if you stick around for the tale I'm about to share with you, you will be able to either copy-paste them in your world as is, or use the information to enhance, to spice up the vengeful spirits in your world. And if you're not into world building and just stopped by for the stories, welcome, and we are very glad to have you here. I'm sure the stories I will share with you were not taught to you in school. Stick around until the end and you will be able to bore the living bejesus out of those around you with this newfound historical trivia. This is going to be a shorter video, so hang tight, you're gonna love it. Before we jump into it, let's talk about the painting part of this video. Okay, here we go, painting my very first Adepta Sororitas. I'm really excited about this one and it's very in theme with today's topic, the Furies. The Warhammer 40k Imperium magazine I bought came with 7 minis. These are the Adepta Sororitas reinforcements. For each of the 7 minis I will try something different to exercise different painting methods, perhaps trying to paint a miniature in 30 minutes flat or even spending 6 hours on it, see what comes out. We'll see as we go along. As for this first miniature, I decided to follow the guide provided in the Warhammer magazine just to get used to it and understand the paint scheme. Right off the bat, I see that there are no instructions for dry brushing after base coating. Okay, I have to adapt, I have to improvise something. What to do? Oh, I know, I'll go with a zenithal priming with Pebeo Black as a base coat, Storm Vermin Fur Grey for adding a smooth transition, and finishing it off with Pebeo White for highlights. The guide then tells me to use Corn Red for the cloth, Mephistone Red to highlight it, Mornfang Brown to paint in the leather bits, Corax White for the insignia, Screamer Pink and Rockarth Flesh for the participation badges, Lead Belcher and Stormhost Silver for the metally bits, and Retributor Armor for the other insignia. Oh, and Astrogranite for the base. I have all of these colors, so it should be pretty straightforward. Of course, I will deviate slightly from the guide in the magazine as I want to highlight more and I don't want to paint the bolter in pure lead belch. I'm sorry, but I need a coal black weapon with silver metally bits. I can't see it fully silver. Now for the pre-story checklist to make sure we are all ready to go. I have some coffee in my mug this time. I don't have freshly brewed tea. It's a little bit cold right now, but it's still a wonderful, wonderful tea. My wonderful assistants are not around me. They're slipping their whiskers off out in the hallway. And I do have something for the soul. How about you? Are you ready for a fascinating story filled with myth and legend? Do you have a tasty drink on hand? Perfect. Then I think it's time for a story. As legend have it, the Erinyes, or the Furies as they are better known, were the vengeful spirits the fate relied upon to punish those who tried to cheat their destinies. There are several versions when it comes to their origin, as they are very, very old entities, initially mentioned in the Mycenaean Greek language. As a bit of context for a better understanding, there are 2 civilizations that are the foundation of the Greek civilization as we know it today. I will go on a deeper dive on the subject another time, as it is very extensive and it's not the subject of today's episode. But we do need a little bit of context. The Minoan civilization was established in Crete and several other islands around the Aegean around 3000 BCE. They started their downfall around 1450 BCE and finally fell around 1100 BCE. This was one of the most advanced civilizations in the Mediterranean at that point. One of the best known things left by the Minoans, as it is relevant to our fantasy worlds, is the Minotaur, the son of the ruler of Minos who was cursed. Around the same time, another civilization was on the rise in the Peloponnese, the Mycenaean civilization. They started expanding around 1700 BCE and fell around 1100 BCE. Conquering most of mainland Greece and establishing trade routes with the Levant, the Middle East and Egypt. Most of the myths and legends that are at the base of the Greek pantheon come from the Mycenaean, among many other things, but this is relevant to us. The Mycenaean were heavily influenced by the Minoan, as they were neighbors and overlapped. Why am I telling you all this and why is this important? Well, because around 1100 BCE, both the Minoan and the Mycenaean collapsed because of a combination of any of the following causes and perhaps many more. Climate change, volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes, overpopulation, internal strife, droughts, invasion of the sea people. Oh, that's a really good one actually. I'm gonna make a video on the sea people at one point. It's so insane. Nobody knows who they are, where they came from. I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's gonna be good. So, there is no clear indication of what happened actually, but over the next few hundred years, the major Mycenaean and Minoan centers were reduced to mere villages. Then the Greeks rose again around the 8th, 7th century BCE, and we get the Greeks that we know and love nowadays. So, the Erinyes have a very long story, originating in Mycenaean times, but they could have easily come from the Minoans. A long history indeed, just about as long as this whole explanation. But as I mentioned over and over again, history is insanely vast and things are so intertwined that when you pull on a thread and try to tell a story, you get a whole tapestry of information, all relevant and all intertwined. Okay, before I almost lose track of what I am talking about, let's get back to the story of the origin of the Furies. One of these origins can be found in the works of Hesiod, who tells us that they were born from the Titan Uranus drops of blood as they fell on Gaia, on the earth. The Titan Uranus was the representation of the sky and Gaia was that of the Mother Earth. This instantly tells us that the Erinyes were daughters of sky and earth. The reason the Titan Uranus was bleeding was that he was castrated by his son, the Titan Kronos, the representation of time, who threw his genitalia in the sea. Besides the Furies, from the drops of blood that fell on the earth before reaching the sea, depending on what they fell on, other entities sprang forth. From the drops of blood that fell on trees, the Meliads or the tree nymphs were born. From the drops that fell on rocks, the giants were born. And once the severed genitalia hit the water, from the crest of the sea foam, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, lust, pleasure, excess, birth, basically sex, drugs and rock and roll, was born. We are dealing with primordial deities here, the old gods that the new gods, Zeus, Ares, Apollo, Athena, defeated and replaced in a cataclysmic war. Thus, we are told that the Furies predate the gods we all know, and are in essence daughters of Titans. Another variant is that they were the daughters of the primordial goddess of the night, Nyx, the origin of the word night actually. This makes them the sisters of the Fates, whom they help. And in the Aeneid, the work of the ancient author Virgil, they are said to be the daughters of Hades and Nyx. Actually, Dante Alighieri expands on this, and in his works, he has them guard the gates to the city of Dis. And this right here is right up our alley as D&D players, actually as TTRPG players in general. In the works of Sophocles, they are the daughters of Darkness and Gaia, so Darkness and Earth. The first one to write down their names was Euripides, who also tells us that there's 3 of them. We have Alecto, the endless or unceasing anger. We have Megara, the jealous rage, and we have Tilphusia or Tisiphone in Latin, the vengeful destruction or the avenger of murder. Pretty straightforward if you ask me. Sources tell us that the Greeks were deathly afraid of uttering their names, as to not invoke them, so they used other names such as Eumenides, meaning the gracious ones, and Semnai, meaning August. It is interesting that they were so feared that people did not mention them, like Voldemort in Harry Potter. I think this is the perfect moment for a break before we talk about their roles, so let's go to the miniature. Okay. I hit my first snag with this paint job. I did not notice that the camera was out of focus a little. At least you're getting a very good look at my wet palette. Anyway, as I mentioned before, I was initially going with the miniatures color scheme as mentioned in the magazine, but I realized that I need a little bit of more detail added. So once I painted the cloth in corn red, I started adding thin layers of Mephiston red to highlighted, and then I turned to Evil Sun's Scarlet for the final highlights. Also, when it comes to the Purity Seal, I did not go with Rockhard Flesh, instead I went with Xandrid Dust because I wanted it a little bit darker. I kept going with darker color schemes for the other parts of the equipment, such as the leather bits. I went with Catachan Flesh, and then later I will come in with Mournfang Brown and highlight the Catachan Flesh leather parts. I wanted to be a little bit darker, as I found the color scheme provided in the magazine a little too bright. Now let's return to the story. Let us continue with our story and talk about the roles the Furies actually had and how they influenced, according to legend, different outcomes. They had multiple roles, and depending on the sources you are reading and the day and age when the sources were written, there are differences, but there is a main direction. They were tasked with punishing those who tried to play with destiny, either by trying to cheat their own destiny or by intervening in the destinies of others, usually in a brutal and violent way, usually through murder. They would ascend from the underworld where they lived and hunt down those who were guilty of parricide or the murder of close relatives, guilty of fratricide, the murder of one's brother or siblings in general, or homicide in general. But they had another role as well, that of hunting and punishing those who broke their oaths. Legend has it that they attended the birth of Oath, son of Strife. It sounds strange, I know, but it's quite simple if you think about it. The ancients found it easier to have abstract concepts be embodied and thus something palpable, tangible. Oath was born out of strife, and the Furies were there to either assist or just witness this birth. Thus, they can be considered, and they were considered, protectors of oaths and punishers of those who broke oaths. Simple, right? Oh, and they also punished those who swore false oaths, especially in the court of justice. This whole part is quite interesting if you are a world builder, and even if you're not. Think about it. They attended the birth of Oath, the son of Strife, and thus they punish those who break their oaths. I would imagine an Oathbreaker paladin who is forever on the run, outpacing the Furies, or possessing an item that keeps them just out of the reach of the Furies. This Oathbreaker could be a lieutenant of the BBEG, if not the BBEG themselves. The big bad evil guy, if you're lost. The item could be made by a powerful long-forgotten magic wielder in the services of a god that wanted to circumvent their destiny or something. The possibilities are endless here. The only limit is your imagination, so why not insert this in your own world? Another role they had was that of the protector of the elder members of society and older family members, including older siblings. Now, I don't know what the age the older sibling would have had to be in order to qualify for the protection program, but I think it was along the lines of, oh, look, a second child is born. Alright, the older sibling gets in the program, the second one gets in the program once a third kid is born, and so on and so forth. The fact that they tend to protect the older sibling is depicted in the Iliad when Poseidon wants to go against Zeus during the Trojan War, but the goddess Iris, the goddess of rainbows and messages between gods and mortals in the Greek pantheon, reminds him that the Furies protect Zeus, with him being older, although they are twins in essence. But Zeus was born first. Are they twins? Yeah, I think they were twins. Oh no, they're not twins. Zeus, then Poseidon, then Hades, and oh, they were triplets. And each one gets something different. Yeah. Are they triplets? I don't know. I'm getting derailed. By the way, do you have rainbows in your world? What do they represent? What meaning is behind rainbows? Is there any meaning behind rainbows? Leave a comment down below in the comment section if you want to share and perhaps inspire others. I will do a full video on the significance of rainbows across our world at one point, but you already know it by now. That's another story for another time. Another role that the Furies had was that of protectors of beggars, seeing how they were easy victims and there was no one there to actually protect them. So it fell on the Furies to do so. Now let's take another break, talk about the mini before we start wrapping things up. With everything else done, it is time to finish up by tackling the insignia and the helmet. This is where I made a bit of a mistake. It's not quite obvious and it's not very critical, but it's a mistake nonetheless that forced me work a little bit harder to finish the paint job. The mistake is quite simple. I went straight for Pebeo White, a white paint that is very, very bright, if that makes sense. If I would have gone with the recommendation in the magazine and used Corax White, I would have had a very easy time just working my way up to highlights by adding subsequent thin layers of Pebeo White, a white which is brighter. The way I did it, I have to work backwards, and after adding the very bright white, I have to start shading it. I'll be doing this by using Apothecary White Contrast that will bring on some shadow, but eventually I will turn to Corax White to actually add some variety. It's not a huge mistake, but I should have known better. Eventually I did manage to reach the point that I wanted, but it took extra steps instead of being straightforward before adding the Retributor armor. Now back to the story. Let's wrap things up. But because I cannot let you go without telling you a story that clearly shows the role the Furies had and how it changed and evolved, let me tell you about Orestes and Clytemnestra. So, the story of the Trojan War is an old one, and it's just that, a story, most likely dating from the Mycenaean civilization, as it presumably takes place between the 13th and 12th century BCE. Besides the literary sources we have, written centuries after the Trojan War, between the 8th and the 7th century BCE, there are no official accounts of it. Now, this indicates that either the sources have been lost to time, which is very, very possible, or the war never happened. Or perhaps it did happen, but not on the scale it was described. Perhaps it was a local conflict, but it felt so cataclysmic to those who witnessed it that the story was embellished and survived to this day, thousands of years later. Now, we all know the story. Helen of Sparta is considered the most beautiful woman on the earth, and she is married to Menelaus of Sparta. And because of Aphrodite, she falls in love with Paris, Prince of Troy, and runs away with him to Troy. I will have to make a video on the Trojan War, as it is a vast source of inspiration for any fantasy campaign. Believe me, I promise. Menelaus calls upon his brother, Agamemnon of Mycenae, to help him recover his wife. The war happens and lasts for 10 years, and it ends with a Trojan horse. Don't worry, there's a whole point to this intro. Now for the point. Agamemnon returns home to his wife Clytemnestra with his new concubine, Cassandra, a priestess of Apollo. Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus plot and eventually murder Agamemnon. She murdered him because at the start of the war, he sacrificed their daughter Iphigenia for favorable winds to take his army to Troy across the sea. And because he came back with another woman, so that's a double whammy. Human sacrifices were a huge no-no in the ancient Greek and Roman world, so Clytemnestra was somewhat in the right to take him out, although in the end it is still murder, but she had her reasons, apparently. Years later, their son Orestes comes of age and is ordered by Apollo to avenge his father by murdering his mother. Yeah, this is insane, I know, just don't report me. This is all written down in the Iliad, and actually it's in the Odyssey. Now, he pretends to be a messenger that brings news of his own demise, as Clytemnestra does not know what he looks like for some reason, and he is able to take out his mother. Although Apollo was the one who ordered this assassination, the Furies pursued and tormented Orestes. As they should. Orestes visits the Oracle of Delphi, the most important in those days in Europe, parts of the Middle East and Northern Africa, and is told by the Oracle to visit Athens and ask for the help of the goddess Athena. She agrees and decides that Orestes should be tried by a jury of citizens of Athens, with her presiding. The Erinyes are Orestes' accusers, while Apollo is his defense. I mean, having a god for a lawyer, not too shabby. The arguments go back and forth. There is a discussion around who's to be respected more, the mother or the father. There's a discussion about the necessity of blood vengeance, the priority older deities such as the Erinyes have before the new gods such as Apollo. The citizens of Athens vote equally for both sides, so it is a draw. So it comes down to Athena to break the tie. She votes that Orestes is innocent, so the Furies vow to torment the city of Athens and poison its wells in response to this. Athena offers an alternative and persuades the Erinyes to become protectors of justice and of the city, no longer spirits of pure vengeance, to no longer support the idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, except in war, where the battles are fought for glory, not pure vengeance. And then she reminds the Furies that she, as Zeus's daughter, has the keys to the room where he stores his thunderbolts, the same ones used by her father to defeat the Titans, the old gods. She then promises that if they accept, they will be honored properly in Athens. In face of these bribes, mixed with not so veiled threats, the Erinyes agree and forgive Orestes, becoming the protectors of Athens. This is a given explanation for them being called Samnai, the venerable ones, by the Athenians. But I still like to believe that if they were called Erinyes by the true name, they would remember their true nature and wreak havoc. But that's just me. As you can see, religion is quite complicated at first glance, but not really if you understand the mechanics behind it. While in university, there was one course during which we were taught something very simple. The more a population grows, the more the entities that need to keep that population in check become more punishing, the more the religion becomes more rigid, the more religious people become. It's a feedback loop that becomes more and more rigid as time passes by. Anyway, I believe I forgot to mention one role that the Furies had, that of making individuals blind with rage. Of course, makes sense. But basically they were preventing individuals who were enraged from using their common sense, their wisdom, and they failed to see reason, leading to acts of utter stupidity, acts that were far removed from one's character, acts that were very odd and very mean, but in essence very, very stupid. And with that, I believe there is enough material here to enhance your world, if not, even write a whole campaign around the Furies. If you enjoyed this video and found value in it, please make sure you like, as it shows me it was useful, subscribe and join this growing funky community, hit the bell so you are notified when the next video is out, and share it with your friends, your GMs, your DMs, your storytellers, your players, neighbors, family, friends, pets, grandparents, everyone. Oh, and if you want to see more of my lovely assistants Mango and Potato, make sure you check out the channel TW Creative or minus Cats, a channel with shorts that have nothing to do with history and everything to do with cat adventures. Oh, and Potato's sixth name and part of her first title is Of. Yes, Of. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time, and I truly hope you found some inspiration and learned something new today. And I can't wait to see you all funky people here next time on Funky Monkey MP, the place where you get a dose of miniature painting, history, world building and trivia. Remember, be curious, take inspiration from the past, and never stop world building and creating amazing things, whatever those are. Your mind and imagination are awesome, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day. Cheers. The old gods that the new gods, Zeus, Mars, Apollo, etc., etc. No, not Mars, Ares. Wow, that was a...